And so when I got diagnosed, I was like, oh my God, it's not my fault. And that was like a huge weight off of me in some sense. But at that exact same moment, I was like, I'm never going to have the body that I've been trying so hard to have. I'm never going to get better. Like I'm never going to be quote unquote in shape. There was this version of myself that I envisioned someday getting to be because I had put in enough work. And that day I realized that was never going to happen. And that was hard.
Welcome. This is Lauren Stites, and you are listening to Her Side of the Trail. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Christine Reed. I wanted to bring Christine on here to talk about health and hiking. Christine has POTS, which is an autonomic disorder, and I have Graves' disease, which is an autoimmune disorder. Both of them have symptoms or side effects or whatever you want to call it that affect how our bodies are during activities or even sometimes doing nothing. I wanted her on here just to kind of bring to light that your health, the things that you're dealing with obviously affect your hiking. And if that happens with you, you're not alone. And I just wanted Christine on here because I love her attitude. This woman is driven, like she's not letting POTS slow her down. And I love that. And I just wanted her on here to kind of inspire you, to also make you feel like, okay, you're not alone. Like, even though social media seems like everyone is perfectly healthy, doing amazing hikes, doing amazing things, like, there's some people out there that, they are working through some things, right? And we're overcoming things. If you're one of those people, you're not alone. I needed to hear that she also had similar issues and difficulties and things like that. Like, I needed that for myself. If you have something going on health related, whether it's a long-term health issue or just a temporary one, you're not alone. Okay, so let's get into this episode. Christine is awesome, and I think you'll love listening to this episode as much as I enjoyed speaking with her. Hi, Christine. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so glad to have you here. How you doing today?
Oh my gosh, so good. After all the technical difficulties, I'm so pleased to be here.
Gotta love computers and tech, right? It's supposed to make life easier for you, but not always. So I just kind of want to have the audience get to know you a little bit. And I was doing a little research on you, obviously, before our interview, and I noticed that you were nomadic for a while, correct?
I was, yeah. I lived in 3 different vans over the course of almost 7 years.
How many places did you park your van over those 7 years? Like, how many states did you cover?
Oh my gosh, I've not counted. Probably like 20 to 25. I would say probably at least half.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Did you stay mainly like on the western side of the country?
Every year I would do an East Coast trip so that I could be at Appalachian Trail Days in Virginia. So sometimes I would just like dart over to the East Coast and do like Virginia, North Carolina, and then head back. But I did a couple summers where it was like full East Coast, like up to Maine. But yeah, other than that, I would be very much West Coast, kind of Colorado centric.
That really sounds a lot of fun, though. I don't know if it's for me, but I still that's kind of like something that I'm like, oh, I would love to do that. But then I think like maybe I'd be in it and I'd be like, what am I doing?
I think van life is definitely one of those things that everybody romanticizes and a lot of people actually shouldn't do.
No, I shouldn't. Maybe for like a week I could do van life.
Yes. A van trip. Yes.
A van trip, yeah. So now where are you based then? Since you're no longer nomadic, you are a full-time resident somewhere. Where is that?
I recently moved to Taos, New Mexico.
Okay.
It's a very cute little like half ski town, half rural farmland.
Oh, so that's nice. So you have like the mountains very close to you then, right?
Yes. Yeah. I'm basically right at the base of the Wheeler Range.
Are you liking being, settled, or do you miss the van life?
It's definitely an adjustment. I spent most of the last year feeling like pretty over being full-time nomadic and ready to find a place and settle somewhere. And of course, like you can want that, and then you get there and you're like, no, I kind of miss certain
Yeah, the
things
grass
about
is
being on
always
the road.
greener, right? Yeah.
Right. Can't we just have it all? So, there are things that I love, and I'm building a little community, and there are things, it's really nice to have the consistency of like every week I go to yoga class and my best friend is the teacher because she's the first person I met when I came to town. Things like that, which are just like lovely routines. And I've like joined a running group, and there's things in town that are super nice to have access to.
Yeah, normalcy is nice.
Yeah,
It's comforting in a way, right?
it is. I think we are creatures of habit, they say.
I am for sure. But I didn't have you on here to talk about your nomadic lifestyle. I actually brought you on here because you and I have something in common. We both have a chronic illness that kind of affects the way we live life and have to approach our activities. And I wanted you on here because I do feel like social media a lot is everyone is happy and healthy. And I wanted to show that, if other people are suffering from some kind of chronic illness that is, affecting their hobbies, I wanted them to know that they're not alone. Other people are like us are out there. So can you share what your illness is?
Yeah, so I have POTS, which stands for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is a form of dysautonomia, which is an umbrella term that kind of encompasses a very wide range of things. And POTS is not super well understood and
No.
also generally co-diagnosed with other things.
Okay.
And after I got my POTS diagnosis, I didn't really pursue other diagnoses because it sort of answered the questions that I was mostly worried about. And so I don't know if there's not some other underlying
There might be something else
condition.
going on too. I mean,
Very possibly.
yeah.
But I think the POTS description, diagnosis, treatment, all of the things around that have sort of answered the questions I had and helped me better manage my symptoms. So getting getting a further diagnosis would be more work than it's worth to me at this moment. Yeah.
How long ago were you diagnosed then?
I got diagnosed in August of 2020. I have had these symptoms my whole life. So it wasn't like a sudden onset thing, which is also common with POTS.
What were the symptoms then that you've had your entire life that you noticed?
So the main symptoms of POTS are generally around heart rate and respiratory rate, at rest and in your everyday life, but also during activity. And so I've always had kind of an erratic heart rate. When I exercise, my heart rate shoots up to like 160, 170 at kind of a casual walking pace. Especially before I've gotten it down a little bit in the last few years with treatment and just like more exercise. But that was sort of the main symptoms I had when I was a kid, which was just like I could not run. I thought I had asthma as a child because that was the only explanation I'd ever heard of why a child wouldn't be able to run. And it is hard to breathe because your heartbeat
Yeah,
is
'cause your
going
heart's
so
beating.
fast.
Yes.
And then you're trying to breathe to oxygenate that blood to keep things moving. And so I did breathe very hard, but I didn't breathe like someone who has asthma. So those are kind of the main things. But then the thing with dysautonomia is it's dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system, which is everything that you don't consciously control. So it also affects blood pressure. It affects temperature regulation. I sweat a ton. Like there's all these other little symptoms that are kind of like lower level than my heart rate is 180. But once you start to understand what dysautonomia is, then you start to notice all of these other things and be like, oh my gosh, is that why I can't stand up in the shower?
You gotta love the body.
Bodies are weird, man. Yeah.
I can commiserate with the high heart rate because I actually have Graves' disease. So that's like hyperthyroidism. Now, I don't have these symptoms anymore because I actually had my thyroid removed over a year ago. But prior to that, I would be laying in my bed doing nothing and my heart rate would spike to 120. So I totally understand that because I'd be doing an activity and it would I'd just be walking down the hall at work and I'd be breathing heavy and it would feel very difficult because my heart rate would just spike out of nowhere. So I can totally appreciate the difficulty and the annoyance behind that.
I feel like once you have a diagnosis, annoyance is a great word, right? Before
Yes.
that, it's like, what is wrong
What is wrong with me? Yeah.
It can be really scary. Once you know
Yes.
what's going on, it's much more just like, this is inconvenient, right?
Yeah, so inconvenient. Very inconvenient. Especially when you're trying to do activities or just live life. Just take a
Yeah.
shower.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to shower. Why can't I do that? So you did notice that some of your symptoms were exacerbated then during activities. Like that's why you couldn't run. It was difficult for that. Um, so now that you know your diagnosis, what have you done to try to counteract these symptoms or avoid, these episodes? Is there anything that you've changed in your diet, your medications, things like that?
Yeah, so I'm not on any medication. There
That's
are
what you said.
some medications that can be prescribed off label for POTS. There's not really anything that's like specifically for POTS.
Is pot something where like you want to increase your sodium intake? Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's one of the things I do is like
Okay.
managing hydration and electrolytes is huge. And that's one of the things that like if I'm not doing it correctly, I'm like, okay, like I gotta go lay down for half a day. Um, so that is one that's really important, especially if you're exercising a lot, especially if you're someone like me who sweats a ton.
Yeah.
So you're like losing electrolytes constantly, losing water constantly. And also, I don't know how much people know about like just respiration in general, but like we lose moisture when we breathe.
Hmm.
So if you are exercising and breathing hard, and especially breathing through your mouth, then you're also like losing a ton of your hydration. So it's not just sweating.
I actually knew that, but I totally forgot about that, and that makes a lot of sense. It really does.
Right. So
So
yeah, if you're gasping for air, as I often do, you gotta drink double.
drink double.
So I do also have some nutrition things, like I had cut out gluten, and some other inflammatory foods, and that seems to do better for me. Those are kind of the main, like, kind of intake things. They do also recommend wearing compression garments,
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
to help with blood pressure
Hmm.
and restricting your vessels. For a long time, I was like, "That doesn't help me, I'm not doing that." And more recently, especially when I'm hiking, backpacking, multi-day stuff, I have a pair of light compression socks that are knee-high that I wear when I sleep, and I do think it helps, as much as I wanna pretend that it doesn't, because I hate wearing them.
They're so uncomfortable.
I really dislike them a lot, but I do think that it
They
helps.
probably do help though, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
They're awful to wear. So that was my next question then. So what are some of the adjustments that you've made then so you can still enjoy hiking and do these multi-day hikes?
Yeah, I mean, they gave me, like, a little pamphlet when I got my diagnosis that was just like, "Here's the things you should do," and one of them was like, "Eat 6,000 milligrams of salt," which I, out of curiosity, went home and, like, measured a little bowl of salt with 6,000 milligrams in it just to see, like, what does that look like? And it's, like, a disturbing amount of salt. It was, like, a quarter
I was
cup.
gonna say, like, that's more
Uh
than you get in like a can of soup.
It's a lot. Um, and I will say, like, everybody's body is super different, and I think that is probably one of the most important things to remember when you are dealing with
Yes.
chronic illness is, like, you are not anyone else, and as much as your doctor can give you a sheet of things that's like, "Here's some stuff you can do to help," like, you have to figure it out for yourself, and I have found that, trying to eat an arbitrary amount of salt every day is ridiculous, but that I can tell based on monitoring when I need more salt just from, several years now of practice of like, "Ooh, I'm starting to feel weird. If I eat more salt, does that help or make it worse?" Or if I drink more water, does that help or make it worse? So I can start to tell sort of what it feels like in my body.
You know your body better than anybody else.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that has been really critical for me, and this may sound counterintuitive to people who are really struggling with symptoms and any kind of activity is a challenge, the more active I am, the better I feel. And if
No.
I can consistently exercise every day, even if that just means like going for a walk and doing some yoga, walking and going to a yoga class is kind of my minimum amount of exercise in a day where I'm not going to feel like progressively worse day to day.
I've noticed that too, that the less active, the worse you end up feeling. Consistency is key. I agree with you on that. But not pushing yourself too much, correct? You don't push yourself too much?
Occasionally we overdo it. Um, and what I have learned from that is that when one has overdone it, you still have to exercise the next day. Um,
Okay. That's good
so
to
I
know.
think when I have gotten myself in trouble is when I have done something very extreme and then been like, I'm gonna rest for 3 or 4 days, and then it's like now I'm crashing.
Okay.
So even if I do something that I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sore, like my body hurts, I'm like depleted," then it's like the next day I have to be like, "Okay, we're really on top of hydration. We're really on top of getting a lot of calories in and then still moving around throughout the day."
For your multi-day hikes, how do you plan for appropriate water intake, all of that? Do you have an idea like how many of your bottles that you need to drink, or how do you plan for that?
So for people who are into long distance backpacking, there is an app called Far Out that is very popular in that community. And it has marked on it like all the water sources, and people can go
Oh,
in and comment and say like this water source was flowing great, or like this one is dried out if you're in an area that's like prone to drought. So most of my hikes, I have pretty good information about where water will be available.
that's really helpful. That's great.
That does help a lot because then it's like if there's water all over the place, like there is on the Appalachian Trail on the East Coast, it's like there's water every 3 miles. Like, you really don't have to carry a ton, and you don't have to stress about it. Out west, it really depends on where you are. New Mexico, desert. There do
Not the
tend
best
to
water
be
sources, yeah.
longer stretches with no water, so that is something that I've been, like, figuring out as I've been hiking out here. Um, but I do find that I do okay if they call it cameling up,
Okay.
in the backpacking world, which is just like drinking a ton of water before you start, or drinking a ton of water when you get to a water source. And that way, if there's not a water source for a long time, you're like, okay, I'm all hydrated. And that's another thing that like you just have to kind of test and learn like how far can my body go on a liter of water or a liter and a half of water if at the beginning and the end I can have as much as I want, or kind of depending on what the conditions are. And then food, same thing, right? Like you learn how often you need to eat, how much you need to eat. I will say one of the biggest game changers for me in hiking and in running was learning how to eat while I was moving and learning to eat at regular intervals. Because certainly on the Appalachian Trail in 2015, which was like my first big hike, I was not diagnosed at that time. I also was not an experienced hiker. So I just had no idea what I was doing on all fronts. And I would wake up in the morning, eat oatmeal, hike for 3 or 4 hours without putting anything into my body,
Oh,
stop and eat lunch, and then hike another 3 or 4 hours without putting anything into my body, and then I would eat 3,000 calories before I went to bed, and let me tell you, my body felt horrible, and this guy that I met on the AT who was a marathon runner was like, "Oh, you gotta eat, like, throughout the day," and I was like, "I don't even know what that means, like, I don't know what you're talking about." And it was not until many years later when I started getting into longer distance running that I started eating, like, gels and gummies and things like that.
a lot of my hiking friends they just eat candy on the trail.
Trail and running, that's both popular. Even things like a Lara bar, I can kind of eat and walk at the
Yeah,
same
I
time,
can't
you
eat
know?
like anything like too heavy when
If
we're
it's too
in,
dense.
yeah, no. But
Well, you also have to think about, like, you're breathing hard, you're trying to chew
yeah.
and swallow, and you're walking uphill, like
Try not to choke on your on your Larabar.
I feel like the skill of eating while moving is, like, even more difficult if you're someone who's, like, breathing like you're gonna die. Like, the number of times I've almost choked on something, it's not 0.
My kids have actually, I think, perfected eating on the trail. They just they're
Nice.
just like, whatever."
Perfect.
They're like, "We're hungry." I'm like, "I don't wanna stop. That's fine.
That'll
We'll just
serve them
walk
later
and
in
eat."
life.
Has your diagnosis then, affected you at all, like, emotionally, mentally, anything? Do you have I know, like, sometimes, like, I just feel just so down, like, so frustrated with especially if you're just having, like, a bad day and you're just like, Why me? Like, why am I stuck with this stupid body?" Do you ever get like that too?
I will say when I got my diagnosis, I left the doctor's office, I sat in my car and I cried. Um, it was kind of a twofold emotional experience because on one hand, I was like, all of these things that I've experienced my entire life suddenly make sense.
Now you have an answer?
And there's a really, really intense sense of relief when you get an answer like that. That's like, oh, I have for so long felt like something was wrong with me on like a personal level, like that I was not good enough, that I wasn't trying hard enough, that I just wasn't like working hard enough to be, quote, "in shape." And by that time, I'd been running for 5 years when I got diagnosed, and I was like, "I've become a long distance backpacker, I hike all the time, I've started running, I'd run a half marathon, I was training for an ultra." I still felt like I hadn't done enough because I looked around at other people and I saw it they don't seem to be struggling as much as I am. So they must have done more or done better or done something to deserve that I haven't figured out yet. And so when I got diagnosed, I was like, "Oh my god, it's not my fault."
Yeah.
And that was like a huge weight off of me in some sense, but at that exact same moment, I was like, "I'm never gonna have the body that I've been trying so hard to have. I'm never going to get better. Like,
Yeah.
I'm never going to be, quote, unquote, 'in shape.'" Right? Like, this what I where I was at that time when I was training for a 50K was the best shape I'm ever going to be in. And still when people looked at me running, they thought, like, "What is that girl doing?"
No.
Right, you know what I mean? But it was like the appearance and what I was experiencing was like I did feel better than I had ever felt before, but I was still heart rate at 160, breathing like I'd never run before. So, like, the best I'm ever gonna feel is like most people's off the couch. And when you realize that, like, I can work as hard as a professional athlete and perform as well as someone who doesn't train.
You're grieving that
The
what
possible
maybe.
person that I
Yeah.
thought I could be.
Yeah.
There was this version of myself that I envisioned someday getting to be because I had put in enough work. And that day, I realized that was never gonna happen. And that was
That's hard.
hard. Yeah.
That's really hard.
And it's been almost 5 years since then. And I think in some sense, I've reconciled that, and I recognize the work that I'm putting in, and
Yeah, you've done so much.
I've I now place myself not as a professional athlete, obviously, because 'cause I'm not competing against the pros,
Yeah.
but, like, I have friends who are professional athletes, and I look at, like, the effort that I put in and the work that I put in, and I'm like, you know, there's a level of equivalence there. There's a level of, like, I'm working really hard to be this best version of myself, and unfortunately, there's a ceiling on that. But I'm really proud to, like, be out there every day continuing to put the work in and, like, trying to be the best version of myself. And I have achieved things that I didn't think that I could in 2020 when I got that diagnosis. I mean, I've gone longer distances than I had planned to do.
That's
It's just the day in and the day out, right? But I also have learned to manage my body so much better because I have this information that it's almost like I'm not necessarily doing more objectively, but I feel better while I'm doing it. Because then I was training for my first 50K and there were days I would go out for my long run, I would run 18 miles, and then I was absolutely useless the rest of the day and most of the day after. I was just because I hadn't fueled
yes.
properly, hadn't hydrated properly, and my body was crashing out. And now I can get through an 18-mile day and, like, I still have to rest afterwards, but I then can get up the next day and, like, go again.
That's incredible. To me, that's awesome, and I understand because I've been there too where especially post, my thyroidectomy, I pushed myself too much, and then I would do, like, a 3-mile hike, something would have like, that's easy, and I'd be, like, dead the next day, like, I couldn't get off the couch, and now I can do, twice, 3 times that, and I'm fine the next day.
Yeah.
So
I would say that my experience now, 5 years later, is less grief over that version of myself that I'll never get to be, and more anxiety about getting sick or going into a flare. I did have that happen in 2022, I'm sorry, 23, where a convergence of things that I'm still not sure I can quite explain, had me mostly bedridden for about 2 months. Um, and that was a really difficult time emotionally for me. And so now anytime that I start to feel a little off, I kind of go into a mental spiral of like, "Oh my god, what if I'm, like, getting really sick again?" It's one thing to deal with baseline chronic illness all the time where it's like, I always feel medium crappy. But I know how to deal with that versus like now things are, going off the rails. And then it just takes so long to recover.
It's just so hard to explain to people who aren't going through it how it feels. It's just, there's like it's no vocabulary for it. No one understands, people try to, they're sympathetic, but it's just, no one really knows how you feel. So you kind of feel alone in that respect too.
There's so much online community for people with chronic illness, and I do think that can be helpful and or toxic depending on where you are mentally. I have definitely been in Facebook groups that I was like, I have to leave this group because this is not helping. And then sometimes you find other people who are like doing cool stuff like you are, and you're like, yay, let's talk about how swollen our feet are, but also like how beautiful this hike is. Meet me in the middle.
Let's talk about how it feels like I'm moving through Jello half the day, but
but I'm out here moving through Jello.
All right. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I also just want to touch on the fact that you are an author. You're a published author. So I just would love you to give me your elevator pitch, as they say, about your two books. You have Alone in Wonderland and then Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Can you talk about those two books?
Sure. So Alone in Wonderland came out in early 2021. And it is about my through hike of the Wonderland Trail, which is a loop around Mount Rainier in Washington.
That sounds amazing.
Which it's 100 miles. Highly recommend if you're looking for a quote short through hike. It's so beautiful. Mount Rainier is a really, really special place. So I hiked that in 2018 solo in the fall. And in the book, I talk a lot about what it's like to be alone on the trail, sort of what we are in search of when we go into nature alone, and the like independence and self-reliance and empowerment that we can get from an experience like that. It's really a coming of age story, I would say. I was 28 at the time of the hike, so I was very much grappling with ideas of independence as a young woman. For someone who's like curious about getting in the outdoors, like I think it's a good, very relatable kind of every woman story because as you know from this conversation, I'm not an athlete. And I was not diagnosed at the time of that hike. And so I talk about the things that are happening in my body, and the battles that I'm kind of fighting against myself, but not with the context of diagnosis.
Of knowing what's going on. Yeah.
If you're a person with POTS, I think it's also kind of an entertaining read in terms of like, this girl doesn't know what's wrong with her, but it's very obvious.
How did she not know?
Like recognizable symptoms there. So that's my first book. And then Blood, Sweat, Tears is my second, which is actually a short story collection by 26 women about their experiences outdoors. So I wrote a little bit of it. And then 25 other wonderful contributors shared their stories as well. It's really a labor of love. It's a beautiful collection. The stories are all centered around relationship to body as a theme. And so there are a couple chronic illness stories. I do talk about POTS in that book. But there's also lovely stories about motherhood, about your relationship to your body as you go through those changes. There's also like a really powerful addiction story. There's a couple about body image and eating disorder. There's a lot of period content, which I love.
Hey, you'll get it.
It's very visceral to read. And I think anyone in a female body reading it is just like, yes, like, why aren't we talking about these things more? So that one has hiking, backpacking, trail running, and mountaineering stories. It's all trail based.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing about those. Where can everybody find you?
My website is ruggedoutdoorswoman.com. My Instagram is Rugged Outdoorswoman. I'm on a couple other platforms, but I'm really not active on any of them except Instagram. So if you want to talk to me, send me a DM. I love chatting with people. I'm very accessible on that platform specifically.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Christine, thank you again so much for your time and for sharing about your diagnosis and how you've been dealing with it. And I just, just letting people know that they're not alone out there.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to Her Side of the Trail. There are more hiker stories to hear, so please follow along to hear them as soon as they come out. And if you like this episode, please share it with your friends or on social media. Her Side of the Trail is hosted and produced by me, Lauren Stites. I can't wait to share another hiker's story with you next episode.